The judge's laughter echoed through the courtroom like a gavel striking twice. He leaned forward, smirk carved deep into his face, mocking the teenager standing before him. To everyone watching, it seemed like another open and shut case. Just a kid caught in the system, hopeless and out of his depth. "Young man," he said, chuckling loud enough for the gallery to hear. "This is not a playground. You don't just stroll in here and think you can outsmart the law. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories." So, the defendant shifted in his seat. He looked barely out his teens, his oversized shirt and borrowed tie hanging awkwardly on his frame. The gallery whispered, "Another kid who thought he could beat the system." But then, he reached into his worn briefcase, pulled out a folder, and placed it calmly on the table. The seal of Harvard Law School gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. The judge's laughter stopped. The room fell into silence. And in that moment, everyone realized this case wasn't what it seemed. Riverton wasn't the kind of town you'd expect to make headlines. Nestled along the Ohio River, it was the kind of place where news meant a high school football championship or a factory reopening. But in September 2011, Riverton found itself at the center of a story that would echo far beyond its borders. The case centered on Malik Turner, an 18-year-old black teenager who had grown up in Riverton's working-class neighborhoods. Slim, quiet, and bookish, Malik was the kind of kid who teachers praised but peers often overlooked. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, while his father, Jared Cole, was an estranged but respected federal agent known for his no-nonsense reputation. Malik dreamed of being a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the kind who could tear apart injustice in a courtroom. He'd been accepted to Harvard Law School through an accelerated program for gifted students. But almost no one in Riverton knew. He kept it quiet, afraid of what would stir. And then came the night that changed everything. On the evening of September 18th, 2011, Riverton police responded to a break-in at Miller's Auto Shop, a local garage that had been hit by thieves twice that summer. The owner, Mr. Miller, a gruff, red-faced man in his 50s, swore he saw a black kid with a backpack fleeing the scene. When police canvassed the neighborhood, they found Malik walking home from the library with, yes, a backpack slung over his shoulder. Inside were law books and case studies. But to the officers, already on edge from pressure to solve a string of burglaries, Malik looked guilty. He was handcuffed under the glow of flashing blue lights while neighbors peeked through curtains. Caught him red-handed. One officer muttered. Malik protested. He hadn't been anywhere near the garage. He'd been studying, preparing for his first semester at Harvard, but his words bounced off the cuffs, ignored his excuses. By morning, he was booked for burglary, facing the full weight of the justice system. Judge Daniel Whitaker was not a man known for mercy. At 65, with silver hair slicked neatly back and piercing blue eyes, he embodied the old guard tradition of Riverton's courts. His reputation was carved from decades of harsh sentencing and public scorn for youthful offenders. When Malik's case landed on his docket, Whitaker barely glanced at the file. Another delinquent kid, he thought, trying to wriggle free with excuses. In the first pre-trial hearing, the judge made little effort to hide his disdain. "Turner," Whitaker said, his glasses low on his nose, "you're barely 18 and already standing here accused of burglary. What's next? Armed robbery?" The courtroom chuckled. Even the prosecutor smirked. Malik lowered his gaze. He'd been underestimated before, but never like this. The Riverton police built their case on shaky ground. Eyewitness account. Mr. Miller claimed he saw Malik, but it was dark and his description was vague. Circumstantial evidence. Malik had a backpack. So did the thief. Pressure. The department needed a quick win. Detective Sloan, a sharp-featured woman in her late 30s, handled the case. She had doubts. Malik didn't fit the profile. No criminal record, stellar grades. Teachers vouching for him. Still, she was bound to follow the evidence. However thin, she visited Malik's mother at the diner. He was at the library until it closed. She said firmly, "You can ask anyone. My boy doesn't steal. He studies." But alibis without documentation are fragile. No cameras, no timestamps, just words against suspicion. On the day of arraignment, Malik's court-appointed defender barely spoke to him. "Plead out," she urged. "It'll go easier." But Malik had other plans. When Whitaker mocked him in open court, Malik calmly opened his briefcase. Inside were meticulously organized files, a timeline of his library visits, statements from peers and teachers, case precedents showing the dangers of unreliable eyewitness testimony, and at the top, a letter of admission from Harvard Law School. "I may look like a defendant," Malik said, voice steady, "but I am also a law student, and I know the law better than you think." The courtroom fell silent. Malik, torn between fear and resolve. He wanted to prove his innocence, but also expose the bias that had stalked him since childhood. Judge Whitaker, arrogant, threatened by a teenager who dared to challenge his authority. His laughter masked insecurity. Detective Sloan, pulled between loyalty to her department and her growing doubt about Malik's guilt. Community, divided. Some saw Malik as a scapegoat, others as a symbol of resilience. As Malik began to defend himself, he uncovered cracks. Mr. Miller's timeline didn't match the break-in report. Fingerprints at the scene didn't belong to Malik. Surveillance footage from a nearby store captured someone else, a white teenager in a hoodie running near the garage. Detective Sloan brought this to the prosecutor, but the DA hesitated. Dropping the case would embarrass the department. Day after day, Malik cross-examined witnesses with precision that shocked seasoned attorneys. He dismantled Mr. Miller's testimony, exposed flaws in police procedure, and highlighted racial bias in the arrest. "Are you saying," Malik asked on the stand, "that every black teenager with backpack is a suspect in your eyes?" The gallery murmured. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. As the trial neared its end, Malik presented the surveillance tape Detective Sloan had quietly retrieved. The grainy footage showed a figure, clearly not Malik, fleeing the scene. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Whitaker's face hardened. His mockery had turned into silence. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Malik was found not guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted, some in relief, others in outrage. But for Malik, it was only the beginning, because as the verdict was read, a figure in the back of the courtroom slipped out unnoticed. Luke Whitaker, the judge's own son. Blonde, athletic, and smug, he bore an unsettling resemblance to the figure in the surveillance tape. The jury had spoken, not guilty. Malik Turner walked out of the courthouse that autumn afternoon, a free man. But freedom didn't taste the way he imagined. Outside, reporters shoved microphones in his face. Neighbors whispered, and officers watched him with cold eyes. Judge Daniel Whitaker didn't speak to him. He just glared, his pale lips tight, his blue eyes burning. But Malik noticed something no one else did. In the back of the courtroom, slipping out just before the verdict, was Luke Whitaker, the judge's son. Blonde hair, smug grin, Letterman jacket. And Malik's stomach dropped, because the boy in the grainy surveillance video from Miller's auto shop looked just like him. For the town of Riverton, Malik's acquittal was divisive. Some hailed it as justice served. Others muttered that the kid got lucky. A few whispered that Whitaker had lost control of his courtroom. Detective Sloan, who had quietly pushed for Malik's innocence, noticed the tension too. She approached Malik afterward. "You did well," she told him, "but you're not out of the woods. Not here." Malik wanted to ask about Luke, but he hesitated. Sloan already seemed on thin ice in the department. Instead, he walked home under gray skies, clutching his Harvard acceptance letter like a shield. Malik should have been preparing to leave for Boston, but his nights were filled with nightmares. The robbery replayed in his head. Ethan Walsh's death from another case still haunting his community, and the judge's mocking laughter echoing like a curse. And now, the face of Luke Whitaker burned in his mind. His father, Jared Cole, who had returned to town quietly after the trial, urged him to focus on Harvard. "You proved your point," Jared said, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sharp suit. "Walk away." But Malik couldn't. Something was wrong. If Luke was guilty, it meant the Whitakers had knowingly let him take the fall. That wasn't just injustice. That was corruption. Detective Sloan began digging quietly. She pulled juvenile records, school disciplinary notes, old police reports. Luke Whitaker's name appeared more than once. In fights, petty thefts, drunk driving incidents, all mysteriously dismissed or lost. When Sloan pressed a clerk, they whispered, "Judge Whitaker makes things disappear." Meanwhile, Malik spotted Luke around town, at the diner where his mother worked, at the gym, even outside the library. Each time, Luke smirked, as if daring him to speak. One night, Malik found notes stuffed in his backpack. "Stay out of it, or Harvard won't matter." The tension finally boiled over at a local football game. Malik, sitting quietly in the stands, locked eyes with Luke across the field. After the game, in the parking lot, Luke cornered him. "You think you're smart, Harvard boy?" Luke sneered. "Stay in your lane. My dad runs this town. You come after me, you'll regret it." Malik held his ground, though his hands trembled. "I'm not afraid of you." Luke leaned closer, his breath sharp with alcohol. "You should be." Detective Sloan uncovered a critical piece of evidence, a partial shoe print from a Miller auto shop break-in that hadn't matched Malik. She quietly had it retested. The result, a match to shoes Luke Whitaker had purchased months earlier, documented on a store receipt. It was enough to reopen the case, but presenting it would mean going against Judge Whitaker himself. Sloan weighed her options carefully. She needed Malik's help. Malik, torn between moving on with his life at Harvard or staying to expose corruption. His sense of justice won't let him walk away. Judge Whitaker, growing paranoid, aware whispers about his son are spreading. His arrogance hides fear of scandal. Luke Whitaker, reckless, smug, escalating. He feels untouchable under his father's shadow. Detective Sloan, risking her career and safety to pursue the truth. Malik agreed to meet Sloan secretly at her office after hours. She showed him the shoe evidence. "This could prove Luke was there," she said. "But the second I file this, it'll vanish. Whitaker controls his courthouse." Malik's jaw tightened. "Then we take it higher. Federal." Sloan hesitated. Going over the judge's head could end her career. But Malik wasn't afraid anymore. 2 nights later, Malik returned home to find the front door ajar, his books scattered, his laptop smashed. On the kitchen table lay a single item, a photograph of him walking into the police station, circled in red ink, scrawled across the bottom, "You should have stayed quiet." Malik froze, because the handwriting wasn't Luke's. It was Judge Whitaker's. The photograph lay on the kitchen table, like a threat carved into paper, a red circle around Malik's head, and beneath it, written in the curling script of authority, "You should have stayed quiet." It wasn't Luke's handwriting. It was Judge Whitaker's. Word of Malik's acquittal had faded, but whispers lingered. Some still believed he was guilty. Others believed he had embarrassed the court. And some feared what everyone refused to say aloud. The Whitakers controlled this town. At the diner, Malik's mother noticed unfamiliar men lingering at the counter. At the library, Malik caught a glimpse of a police cruiser idling for hours outside. Even his old friends began avoiding him. "Son," Jared Cole told him, his tall frame filling the kitchen doorway. "This isn't justice anymore. It's survival. Whitaker doesn't just want you silent. He wants you erased." Detective Sloan worked late nights in her office, combing through sealed files. She found a disturbing pattern. Arrests involving Luke Whitaker. Charges dismissed by Judge Whitaker. Witnesses intimidated or suddenly unwilling to testify. It was bigger than a burglary. It was a network of cover-ups. Sloan met Jared and Malik in secret. "We can't fight this here," she whispered, locking her office door. "The FBI has to take it." Jared nodded grimly. "I still have contacts in justice. But if Whitaker gets wind we're reaching outside, he'll bury us before the feds even step foot in Riverton." The intimidation escalated. Malik's car was vandalized, the word liar etched into the paint. A brick smashed through his bedroom window, attached to a note. "Next time, it's not glass." Sloan received an anonymous envelope with photographs of her daughter walking to school. Whitaker wasn't sending warnings. He was declaring war. Malik wrestled with fear and anger. He'd beaten false charges, but now he was hunted. His dream of Harvard was slipping away. Judge Whitaker doubled down on control, hiding his son's crimes while masking his own desperation with arrogance. Luke Whitaker grew bolder, taunting Malik in public, shielded by his father's power. Detective Sloan faced a moral crisis: protect her family or pursue the truth. Jared Cole carried quiet fury, torn between fatherhood and duty as a federal agent. Sloan finally uncovered a bombshell. Sealed police body cam footage from a night 6 months earlier, showing Luke drunk and belligerent during a traffic stop. The officer had wanted to charge him with DUI, until Judge Whitaker personally arrived at the scene. On the video, Whitaker's voice was clear: erase it or lose your badge. It was undeniable proof of corruption, but as Sloan prepared to transfer the file to federal servers, her computer froze. Then lines of code scrolled across her screen. This evidence is now property of the Riverton court. Attempt to move it again and you'll answer for it. Her system crashed. The file was gone. Malik refused to run. Instead, he began documenting everything: the threats, the vandalism, the intimidation. He reached out to law professors at Harvard, seeking advice on whistleblower protections, but his persistence made him a bigger target. One night, as he walked home from the diner, a truck swerved onto the sidewalk. Malik dove into the bushes as headlights seared the night. The truck roared past, missing him by inches. When he looked up, Luke Whitaker was leaning out the window, laughing. Jared Cole knew it was time. He called an old DOJ colleague. "We're moving this out of Riverton," he said. "We've got corruption at the bench, threats to a witness, obstruction of justice. If we wait any longer, my son won't survive." But the next morning, before they could act, Malik's mother found an envelope taped to the diner door. Inside was a single photo: Malik, asleep in his bed, taken just hours earlier. The photograph of Malik sleeping wasn't just a threat. It was a timeline. The clock in the background read 3:11 a.m. Whoever took it hadn't been peeking through blinds or across the street. They'd been inside his room. Jared Cole didn't say a word. He just set the photo on the kitchen table, holstered the sidearm he rarely wore outside federal duty, and checked every door and window himself. Twice. "Pack a bag," he said finally. "We're not staying here." Malik looked at him. "You think he?" Jared didn't answer, because it didn't matter who. Not anymore. What mattered was that they were out of time. Detective Sloan drove them to an address she didn't say aloud. They killed their phones, wrapped them in aluminum foil, Jared's idea, and took back roads under a hard black sky. The safe house was a foreclosed ranch outside city limits that still smelled faintly of someone's lavender detergent. Jared checked the attic, the crawl space, and the junction box. Sloan unscrewed light plates and outlet covers, collecting 2 pinhole cameras and 1 Bluetooth bug that would have been invisible to anyone not looking for it. "Consumer grade," Sloan muttered. Turned the bug over with gloved fingers. "Cheap, disposable. But who planted it is always the expensive part." Jared took a photo of the device and texted a number from a burner he'd purchased on the way. "If you're tracking us," he said to no one, "do the math. We're already somewhere else." He returned to the kitchen table, and for the first time since the photograph, he looked tired. Not old. Jared never looked old, but tired in a way Malik had never seen. "Listen to me," he said. "We start the process tonight. Federal. Quiet. Sloan, I'll need you to put everything you have in a single package and hand it to me, not the department server. Malik, write down every contact, every threat, every time you saw Luke, everything you remember from that night and the weeks after. No laptops, pen and paper." "Why?" Malik asked. Jared gave him the kind of look that meant he was telling the truth, even when it sounded paranoid. "Because if it's digital, Whitaker already owns it. They met him in the empty parking lot of a church, whose sign read 'You are loved in peeling paint.' Officer David Ruiz was young enough that his uniform still creased the way it did when it was new, but his eyes had the look of someone who'd watched too many lines get crossed. He handed Sloan a plain manila envelope. No one reached for it. The envelope just sat there between them like confession. "I shouldn't have it," Ruiz said. "It's a duplicate. After the DUI, I copied the body cam files. I told myself it was because the chain of custody felt wrong. But really, I knew it would disappear. Sloan broke the seal. Inside, a micro SD card. Jared passed it to Malik without looking, as if it were radioactive and Malik was the only person in the world who wouldn't burn. Why now? Sloan asked gently. Ruiz swallowed. Because last week, a friend of mine, good cop, pulled Luke over again. No ticket, no report. But the judge called him at home that night. That isn't law. That's ownership. Jared exhaled. You did the right thing, officer. Ruiz shook his head. In Riverton, that's not a compliment. It's a countdown. They didn't risk a laptop. Jared had brought a battery-powered viewer the size of a paperback for field checks. Sloan slotted the micro SD. The screen flickered, then stabilized into the harsh fisheye of a bodycam frame. Headlights. Rain. A young man in a Letterman jacket, leaning on the hood of a car that looked too expensive for the teenager slurring into the night air. Luke Whitaker. An officer's voice. Kid, you're done tonight. Sit tight. A minute later, another set of headlights. Then the shape of a man stepping into the frame, umbrella snapping open like a verdict. Judge Daniel Whitaker. His voice was low, controlled. The kind of voice you'd use if you want to be quoted verbatim and still sound reasonable. Officer, I'll take it from here. Sir, the officer said uneasy. This is a stop. It needs a report. Then report that I advise you to use discretion. Discretion is legal. Discretion is humane. Sir, he's intoxicated. And so is the town on Friday nights. Whitaker replied, that faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Erase it, or lose your badge. The frame wobbled, Officer Ruiz's breath catching behind the lens, and then steadied on the judge's face. He knew he was on camera. Maybe that was the point. Power sometimes admired its own reflection. Sloan killed the playback. The silence that followed had a temperature. Between this and the shoe print, we can justify more than a referral, Jared said. We can justify a task force. Bigger question, Sloan said evenly. Can we survive one? They didn't announce anything. They didn't file it where Whitaker could see. Jared reached out to a woman name dropped only as Ava, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Corruption Unit, the kind of person who spoke in verbs. 3 days later, Ava was in Riverton dressed like no one you'd notice. Black flats, gray blazer, hair pulled back. She listened. She didn't ask for the tape. She asked for the context. Names, dates, favors traded, careers worn, how often discretion meant because he's my son. She didn't promise a raid or a headline. She promised subpoenas, sealed and silent, the kind that arrived like a whisper and removed the air from a room. 2 rules, she told them. You don't tell anyone local unless I say so. And you don't pretend this keeps you safe. It makes you a priority. A priority for who? Malik asked. For everyone, Ava said. Us and Numb. They needed something that wasn't ghosted through a chain of custody Whitaker could kill. Something live. Something indisputable. Sloan proposed control meet. Luke had been texting Malik since the confrontation at the football field. You think you're a hero? Your daddy can't protect you. The messages had grown sloppier, meaner. Bragging has a rhythm. So does guilt. Malik, under Jared's watch and Ava's rules, answered once. Meet me. Let's talk. Without your father. He sent a place that could be surveilled without being obvious. The old quarry, a bowl of crushed rock and water, where teenagers want to feel older. Ava's team set up 2 perimeters. One close enough to capture audio, one far enough that local eyes would look right past them. Jared hated it. When he said so, Ava didn't argue. You're not wrong, she said. We're just out of choices. Luke arrived in a truck that still smelled like expensive cologne and cheap Triumph. He brought 2 friends because bullies do. Because it's easier to be brave in a chorus. Malik stood with a cliffside bent into shadow, palms open, every nerve screaming at him to run, and every reason he'd ever had telling him to stay. You brought people, Malik said quietly. Luke grinned. So, did you? Talk. Then, Malik said, tell me you didn't break into Miller's. Tell me your father didn't clean it up. Tell me I wasn't supposed to be the doormat you wiped your feet on. Luke's jaw clicked. Then he laughed. Why would I tell you? Harvard? You can't prove anything. My father runs. Ava's mic crackled in Jared's ear as if outrage had a frequency. Hold, she said. We need the admission. Luke stepped closer, breath sour with beer and victory. You were perfect, you know that? Backpack, library boy, all that reading. No one sees a thief if he smells like books. But I saw an opening. And my father... Jared moved before he knew he had. Ava's hand caught his sleeve, and he stopped with an effort that felt like tearing muscle from bone. Let him talk, Ava whispered. Let him hang himself with his father's rope. And Luke did. Not a full confession. People rarely hand you what you need in a sentence you can frame, but enough threads to braid a cable. Opening father, erase report. The kind of words that become stronger when they're surrounded by silence. Then Luke shoved Malik, hard enough to send him skidding gravel to the lip of the quarry, and Jared to the plan away. He was a father before he was anything else. He was running, shouting, the perimeter bursting like a paper fence. By the time he reached Malik, officers who didn't announce themselves had Luke in a hold that looked gentle from 10 yards and cruel from 10 inches. Ava's eyes were on the horizon. We just lit the town, she said. The next morning, Judge Whitaker called an emergency hearing no one had noticed on the docket until existed. Ex parte, administrative. The kind of hearing where justice is spelled in initials and whispered to clerks who never look up. Sloane went to the courthouse anyway. She stood in a hallway that had been polished to a mirror by scared shoes and waited. Whitaker emerged like a verdict in a black robe. Detective Sloane, he said, with politeness at its edges. Did you lose your way? Sloane didn't move. No, Your Honor, she said. I'm exactly where I mean to be. For a half second, something like respect flickered there, either for her courage or the efficiency with which she'd wrapped her career in gasoline and struck a match. Tell your federal friends, Whitaker murmured, stepping close enough that the words belonged to the space between them, not the air, that this is not their county. And tell your boy that his father's badge won't save him when the time comes. My boy has a name, Sloane said. It's Malik Turner, the one you laughed at from the bench. Whitaker smiled, a small, sharp thing. Everyone is someone's boy. The subpoenas went out anyway. Bank records, campaign donations, a shell corporation that rented security equipment to law firms that didn't exist. Some came back empty. Some came back with black rectangles where the names should be. And one came back from a credit union in a neighboring county with no redactions at all, as if someone there hated Whitaker more than they feared him. A ledger, payments, dates, descriptions that always use the same euphemism. Consulting. The amounts were wrong for consulting. Too neat, too regular. Some had initials. Some had single words. Fence. Quiet. Erase. And 4 times in the last 2 years, a name in full. Jared Cole. Malik stared at the page until the numbers blurred. His father didn't look at him. He didn't look at the ledger either. He looked at the table like it was a thing he could lift and use as a shield. A coincidence, Sloane said carefully. There are other Coles. Not here, Ava said. She kept her voice gentle and her eyes hard. In a town this size, that name means one person. Malik's mouth went dry. Dad! Jared didn't answer right away. When he did, it was in a voice that carried through courtrooms and down hallways and into rooms where men told the truth because a lie wasn't pointy enough to hold. I never took money from Whitaker, he said. Not once. Not ever. Ava nodded once. Then we prove it, or we prove the ledger is a lie. Sloane leaned in. It's a trap. Jared's jaw worked. It's an opportunity. If Whitaker forged it, he left fingerprints. If he didn't, then someone on my side did. Either way, we pull the thread. Malik looked at the page again. The dates under his father's name carved tracks down the paper. 1 3 years ago, 1 2 years ago, 1 last fall, and 1 2 months ago, the week before Malik was arrested. Dad, Malik said quietly, where were you that week? Working, Jared said. For who? For you, Jared said, whether you knew it or not. They didn't see the flames until the safe house's smoke detectors screamed. It happened fast. Gasoline in the crawl space. A match slipped through a vent. The kind of trick that looks like tragedy if you don't know what you're looking at. Jared had them out the back in 30 seconds. Sloan was already on the radio, with a voice you could measure a mile by. Sirens bled into the sky. The house burned like a secret. On the gravel shoulder, Malik watched Orange climb into the rafters. He thought of the ledger and his father's name, and the night the truck swerved and the photo of himself asleep. At 3:11 a.m., Ava stood beside him. He's escalating. Who? Malik asked. He didn't recognize his own voice. Ava didn't answer. She didn't believe in naming an enemy before you pinned him to the wall with proof. She believed in nails and paperwork. Sloan stared at the fire. He's telling us to get out. Jared shook his head. He's telling us we're close. It came just after midnight on a line only 3 people knew. Ava answered on the first ring and hit speaker, so no one could say later that she kept it to herself. A man's voice, disguised with the kind of distortion app you could download for 99 cents and ruin lives with. If you want the truth, the voice said, be at Thorpe Storage, Unit 14, tomorrow, 2 a.m. alone. If anyone else comes, there will be no more ledger, no more tape, no more you. Who is this? Ava asked. Silence. Then a click. Jared's mouth was already a straight line. It's a kill box. Maybe, Ava said, or maybe it's a leak. Sloan looked at Malik. You're not going. Malik looked back. Neither are you. Jared folded his arms. No one's going. We're not trading bait for bodies. Ava glanced at the clock. We have 18 hours. We're going to use everyone. They staged it by the book and broke the book where it mattered. Surveillance. A drone with a camera that looked like a toy. A tracker in the fender of the only truck Jared trusted. A detachment of marshals 3 blocks out, who hated being left that far but liked Ava enough to pretend she outranked their nerves. And Malik in a vest under a jacket that fit like borrowed truth. At 1:58 a.m., the storage facility looked dead. Light pollution made the sky a bruise. Somewhere a train passed carrying the kind of cargo no one photographs. At 2:03 a.m., Unit 14 rolled up like a stage curtain. Inside, a metal folding chair, a banker's box, and a smell like wet cardboard and old secrets. The box held files, checks, a thumb drive taped beneath the lid, a photograph of a boy in a Letterman jacket beside a man in a robe, the joy on their faces as clean as a lie before it learns to talk, and a phone face down that began to ring with a number Malik didn't recognize until his gut did. He hit speaker. Hello, Malik. Judge Whitaker said, warm as a pastor. You've been very busy. Malik glanced at the doorway, at Jared's shadow, at the drone's tiny blinking light. So have you. You found my ledger, the judge said. Good. It's always helpful when an opponent believes his own evidence. Saves me the trouble of arguing. You forged it, Malik said. He made his voice calm. He'd learned that calm could be a blade. Maybe, Whitaker said. Maybe not. Maybe the truth's the trick, and the trick is the truth. What matters is what your father did when his name appeared. Do you know, Malik? Do you know what he did for you? Malik didn't speak. The judge chuckled. You'll open a file in that box. The one with blue tape. You'll read the last page. And then you'll ask yourself a question you've been avoiding since the night you were arrested. Malik found the file. Blue tape. Last page. For lines of text. A signature. His hand shook. Jared stepped in. What is it? Malik looked up at his father. At Sloan. At Ava's narrowed eyes to the camera feed. He was a Harvard-bound kid with the kind of mind that could turn a courtroom inside out and wring the truth from its rafters. But he was also a son. On the phone, Whitaker's voice smiled. Tell him, Malik. Tell him what his badge bought you. Tell him why your file never made it to county records until the morning after my son slept off the night. Malik swallowed hard. The words on the page blurred and then sharpened, lining up with the memory of a clock glowing 3:11 a.m. and a father who looked tired for the first time in his life. He lifted his eyes to Jared's and asked the only question that could burn hotter than the safe house, cut deep in the ledger, and decide whether justice was a word they said to feel safe or a thing they bled to make true. "Dad, what did you do the night I was arrested?"